This tutorial is sponsored by 3D.sk, human photo references for 3D artists and game developers. Check them out by using the link in the video description below. Hey there beautiful people! The objective of this tutorial is to create a walk cycle, like the one, if I just press play, there we go, like the one that you can see on screen here. So there we go, we've got a walk cycle that is a couple of steps that are being looped constantly. So our objectives for this tutorial are to learn about all the different poses that make up a walk cycle, as well as learning about the timing that's needed to make a convincing walk cycle as well. As for the technical side of things, we'll also be learning about auto key, which is a great time-saving thing that you can do in Maya, and we'll also be learning how to copy and paste poses from one keyframe to another, again because that'll help us save a lot of time when things are being repeated. As always, I'm uploading this tutorial in two versions. So there's the long version, which you're currently watching, where all the different steps are cut together into one long video. The other version is the shorter version. If you prefer that, that is each video is its own separate video that will be put together in a playlist, and that breaks it down a little bit more. If you want that one, check the description below and you'll be able to switch over to that version. As well as the tutorial videos, there's also a written guide which is already available to my patrons. If you would also like it, then you need to become a patron too, so follow the link in the video description and you'll be able to see my Patreon campaign and join up if you want to. Okay, that's the introduction out of the way. So in the next step, we will look at gathering some reference material before we get underway. So I'll see you in the next step. Hi there, welcome to step one of the walk cycle tutorial. So the first thing that we need to do in this step is get hold of the rig that we're using. So the rig that I've just shown you in the example is this happy guy, and he is called Ultimate Walker, and I will show you where he lives on the internet. So if we go to this website here, so this is cgmeetup.net, and I'll put the exact link in the video description, but you can see on this page, which was written by a Jason, so I'm going to assume that Jason is the guy that created these rigs, and they're ace. You can see he's got loads of different character rigs here that are really good for learning animation. And if you scroll down a little bit, you'll find Ultimate Walker, and it tells you what its features are, and the all important thing is this download button here. So make sure you download it, which I have already done. So if you have a look here, I have downloaded Walker. So we'll just open that up. Okay, so this is what it looks like once you get him open, with no animation on him or anything. So here he is, handsome chap. So he's quite a simplified rig. He hasn't got arms or a head, he doesn't need them, because we're just learning the kind of mechanics of getting the legs animated in this video. So that's kind of all we need. Okay, so in addition to the rig that we've got, we also need some reference stuff. So if we go back out to the internet, hi internet, and I'm going to be looking for some video reference first of all, and I'm going to be using 3D.sk, who have kindly agreed to sponsor this tutorial, so thank you very much for that. And it's just as well really because I'm using their video reference. So what I'm going to do first of all is find a walk cycle, a video walk cycle that I like the look of. So to do that, I'm going to go in here. Now the first thing I'm going to change is close type, because you see there's a nude thing here, and if I was to leave that as anything, there would be so much nudity. So we'll just go for casual clothes, I think, in this instance. We're going to have a look in the video section, and I want walking video, and I'm also going to change the search for to videos here. And then when I click on search, here we go, and I actually want to use this first one, so she's just going to walk across, I think, and there's also one where she walks forward as well. So we'll just go for this first one here, make sure it opens up alright, and this is what I want it to be. Yeah, so that's just kind of showing how she walks like that. So I'd highly recommend doing that, because what I've done is I've broken this down a little bit. So if we have a look here, I've actually taken the video and I've broken it down into the poses. And you can see I've also assigned some frame numbers to them, which I'll talk about how I did that shortly. But you can see we've got each of the poses. So this one here is the first contact pose. The good thing about kind of getting video reference when you break it down is you can see all the different things that change. So I think if it's the first time you've done a walk cycle, you'd maybe fall into the trap of thinking it's just the legs that you need to move, which is not the case. you actually need to be moving more than that. And you see in this example here, if we look at where the hip is over here, in fact, let's just yeah, you can see it's more this bit here and this bit. You can see that this is kind of facing forward, whereas over here that bit of the hip has gone. So the actual hips are rotating as well, which is something that you really need to look at. As well as that, you can kind of get a feel for what the shape of the kind of legs is in each frame. So you can see that one like that is not quite, the feet are up in the air. So that's worth looking at. And on this one here, we can kind of get up from the hips. We can see there's a bend, but the toes are lifting. So we're going to get that kind of, that shape there where there's still something in contact with the floor. So breaking these down and having a look kind of what's happening on each frame is a really good way to do things. And I would highly recommend going to somewhere like 3D.sk for their reference video, or filming yourself doing the movements that you're looking at, because your animation will be a lot stronger because you've taken the time to do that. This is what it looks like from the side. If we have a look at the front as well, we can also see some important stuff. So we saw that the hips are kind of rotating backwards and forwards, but they also rotate up and down. So if we look here, so she's got her right leg down, and this leg is contacting, but you can see the hips are kind of going down in that direction. And then when she swapped legs, so once this one here is the one that's forward, you can see that the hips, the rotation of them has changed. So when we're animating this, we also need to be aware of this and put some rotation into the hips. And here, although it's not perfectly straight, it kind of should be. So you can see that the rotation of the hips is happening all the way through, and that's something that we need to get into the animation as well. That is what this video reference can be really critical for really getting that understanding of what's happening. So in addition to that, you can see here I've got these frame numbers, and these are very specific frame numbers. We're going to be animating this on 12s, which is animation speak for the kind of speed that we're going to be doing. So that's 2 steps per second. So we're going to have left foot forward, right foot forward, and that's going to happen in 1 second. And where I got these frame timings from is from a book, would you believe? So I want to show you this book because it's ace. This one here, there you go, can you see it? There it is. This is called The Animator's Survival Kit. And if there was a Bible for animation, it would be this. It is so good. And I will try and show you. What I'll do is I think I'll overlay some video over this section so you can see what I'm looking at. But you've got the different poses here have been laid out. But more importantly, on the other page, the frame timings are there. So you can see that the first contact has been put on frame 1 and the last contact is put on frame 13. And that's for 1 step. So we know that we are going to double that so that we can have 2 steps. It shows you where the passing pose should be and where the up and down poses should be. And this book is phenomenal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to link to this book, because if you want to be an animator, you should own this book. It should be with you at all times. To give you an idea of kind of the depth that it goes into, there's about 100 pages covering walk cycles. It then moves on to runs and stuff like that. So it's ridiculously good for the fundamentals. So I'll put a link below to somewhere that you can buy the book, probably Amazon. And if I can figure it out, it might be a referral link. So I might get a kickback if I can work out how to set that up. But I should probably state that now just in case I do get that set up. Yeah, check this book out. This is where I'm getting the timings from for this walk cycle. So I'm using a lot of reference material to get this working. So I've got video reference. I'm also looking at the animation guide in this book. I'm getting frame timings, and it's all going to come together in the next step when we start putting the contact poses in. With that said, the next thing that we need to look at, let's go back into Maya. We just want to get Maya set up for creating this animation. So the first thing I'm going to do is kind of change my workspace. So up in the top corner we're set to Maya Classic, which is great for most things, but I want a little bit more on screen, and I'm just going to kind of change the layout. So I'm going to drop this down and go to Animation, which is the one at the bottom. And you'll see this changes a few things. Now we've got, this is a graph editor down the bottom, which is really good, and we'll use the graph editor later on. And we've also got this here, but I don't want this. So I'm going to tap spacebar and it should put me into the 4 view, which it does. That's exactly what I want. And then I'm going to pull this down because I only want 2 views. So I've got my perspective view over here, and this is the top view, which is not actually what I want. So I'm just going to change this panel to orthographic side, and this is the view I want. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit on this because I'll do most of the animation in the orthographic views. So this is what I want to see. Here is just kind of for preview purposes, but this one here is the important view. Okay, so we've got that set up. The next thing that I want to do is go into the settings. So let's click on this little chap down here. I love this guy. He looks like he's being attacked by a cog. Like, oh, he's chasing me, no! So here he is. Right, so I'm just going to change that to start at 1, like that. And we also want to make sure that the playback speed is on real time 24 frames per second, like that. So that's what I'm going for. So we'll leave that one there. I also want to change something else. I'm going to go to the animation settings here, and we're looking at the default in and out tangent. And what tangents are the shape of your animation curves, and we'll cover this a little bit later. So at the moment they're set to auto. I don't like leaving it auto because then I feel like I'm not in control. So I'm going to change this to being spline, which I'm quite comfortable with. I may well change them away from being spline when I'm making the tweaks later, but I'm going to have them at spline now because I'm comfortable with it. So we'll click on save. Okay, so that's basically Maya setup for this animation. There's one more thing we need to do. So I'm starting at frame 1, but I need to end at frame 25. So I'm just going to type 25 in this box and press enter. Yay! So we're going from 1 to 25, which will allow me to put in the timings that I just kind of showed you. Okay, so before we can actually get any animation done, we're going to turn on one last thing. This is called Auto Key, and it's amazing. So it lives here, this little icon just here. There you go, Auto Keyframe Toggle. We click on that, you see it stays on. And what this does, on frame 1 in the next step, we're going to set keys on everything. So all the controllers. And then whenever we move on to another frame and change anything, what will happen is it will automatically drop a keyframe on there for us, which is a ridiculously good time saver. It can also keep your graphs a little bit neater as well. So we need to have that on. Right, we're now ready to move on to the next step and start doing some animation. So the next step, we're going to set up the first contact pose, which will be on frame 1. So make sure that you've got all your settings like I've got. Check out the Animator Survival Kit and also have a look at 3D.sk for some reference stuff. And I will see you in the next step where we'll get the first pose put together. Okay, here we go. It's time to get some animation done. The first thing we'll do is set up the first contact pose. And the reason it's called a contact pose is because it's from when the foot that was at the back that's just been raised contacts with the floor again. So if we have a look in my little series of images that we used earlier, it's when this foot here at the back has been, so you can see it's been raised, it's passed, and then here it's contacting with the ground again. So that is a contact pose. So we're going to create the first of these. So let's get into it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do some work on the hip controller. We're also going to make sure that the playhead is on frame 1. Right, so what I'll do first of all is just move this down a bit, and I'll also move it forward. The reason I'm moving it down is because we want to give some sort of freedom so the legs can move around. And the reason I'm moving it forward is because I want to create the illusion, the feeling of momentum. So I want it to look like the character's leaning forward. To further the kind of feeling of him leaning forward, I'm also going to rotate him a little bit as well, just so that he's kind of leaning into this walk. Right, I also want to do a little bit more work on these hips, but before I do that, I kind of need to know which leg is going forward and which leg is going back. So I'm going to select the right leg first, and I'm just going to move it forward a little bit, and then I'll select the left leg and I'll move that backwards. And I'm moving the right leg forward just because that's the one I prefer to move. I don't know why, I think it's because it's the one nearest to me. Okay, so now I know which is going forward and which is going back, I can rotate the hips a little bit further. So I'll select my hips controller again, and what I'm going to do now is rotate so that the hip of the foot that's going forward is also facing forward a little bit, so leaning into it. So I'm just going to do that a little bit. Just leaning in, bringing that hip forward. And what I'll also do is I want it to look like weight's being transferred as well. So I'm going to just drop that hip a little bit to make it look like the weight is kind of going through that leg. So I'm just going to bring that down a touch as well. So I'm fairly happy with the hips there. So what I want to do now is work on getting the legs set up on this pose. So I'm going to concentrate on the foot leg first. And what I'll do first of all is just move it as far forward as I can without overextending the knee, which I think is about there. But what I want is kind of, let's just go back to my image. I want to raise it up off the ground a bit like I've got going on there. So to do that, I'm going to introduce you to the extra controls on this rig. So if you look in the channel box, along with being able to access your translate and rotate values, as you can with kind of any object in Maya, there are also these extra character animation controls. And the one that we want in this case is the foot roll controller. So I'm making sure I've got the foot selected that I want to work on. I'm going to left click on this foot roll control here. And then using my middle mouse button, I'm just going to click and drag either left or right until I get kind of what I want. So you can see now that that's raising the foot, which is what I want. So I'm going to raise it to about that sort of angle, I think. And what that also does, it means I can move the foot a little bit further forward as well. So it's giving me a little bit more to work with. So I'm going to move it to there. I think I've actually kind of overextended that a little bit on the foot roll. So I'm just going to rein that in a little bit and just bring that back. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So what I'm also going to do is work on the back foot. So I select that one, and similar to what I just did on the front foot, I'm going to take it as far back as I can without overextending it. So it's about there. But what I want to do now is create kind of a tiptoe sort of effect. So I don't know if I drew that on my image. But what I'm looking for, we'll draw this on now, is this leg that's coming down is kind of contacting with the floor, but then you've got a little bit of a change in the foot there. So that is what I'm going to try and create with this foot. So to do that, I'm going to select both the foot roll, and holding control on my keyboard, I'm going to select the foot break as well. And then with my middle mouse button, I'm just going to drag until I get a foot position that I like. And again, you can see that's giving me a little bit of freedom to be able to move that foot further back, which I'm going to take and give me something like that. Okay. So that is the beginnings of the walk cycle. So this is the first contact pose, and I'm pretty happy with that. So I think what I'll do now is I'll key this pose. So in order to do that, what I need to do is drag a box. So I'm going to click and drag to get a marquee selection of all the controllers. You can see that they're all highlighted here. And then on frame 1, I'm going to press S on my keyboard. And that keys everything. So you can see straight away we've got some red lines here. We've got a red line down here. And if I select any of the controllers, you can see that there you go, everything's keyed. Same on this one, and same on the hips. Everything's now keyed. Brilliant. But what we also need to keep in mind is this is a walk cycle. And for a cycle to work, the first frame and the last frame need to be identical. Being similar is no good. They have to be 100% identical. So to ensure that that's what we get, we're going to make sure we've got all the controllers selected, and we're going to go to frame 25. And then we're going to press S again. And that just ensures that those two frames are going to be exactly the same thing. Right, so that wraps up the first contact pose. Woohoo! What we're going to do in the next step is we're going to set up the second contact pose, where we reverse the leg positions and reverse the rotation on the hips. Right, so far so good. So what we're going to do now is create the second contact pose, where the leg position will be reversed. And for that we need to be on frame 13, because that's in between 1 and 25. And as I said earlier, we're going to be animating this on 12s. So, you know, we started on frame 1, 12 frames later is frame 13. So that's where we need to be. And to get this started, what we're going to do is make sure we've got all the controllers selected, and we're just going to set a key on 13. So now we've got 3 keyframes that are all identical. But now we've got that done, what we're going to do is make sure that we invert some of these things. So I'm going to select my hips controller and I'm going to invert some of the rotate values, but what I'm not going to rotate is the one for the leaning forward. So I can see that that's controlled by this red line, which this here tells me is my X axis. So if I just do that, you can see rotate X is moving. So I'm going to leave that alone because I want it to stay rotating forward all the time. So what I want to do is reverse rotate Y and rotate Z. So to reverse that, so rotate Y, for instance, is set to 11.354. So I'm just going to put a minus before that, and that will give me the opposite value. It'll rotate it that much in the opposite direction. The same for rotate Z, so that's set to minus 5.559. So I'm going to remove the minus. And what that has done for me on frame 13 is now given the opposite effect on the hip controller. The next thing to do is to get the legs swapped over, because you can see now that we've made the changes to the hips, the legs have gone a bit crazy, so they're going to need some help. So in order to do that, I'm going to go to frame 1, and I'm going to start with the right leg first, so this one here. So I'm going to get that, and I'm going to copy the values onto the other leg on frame 13. So I'm going to right click on my timeline on frame 1, and I'm going to copy. And then what I'm going to do is go to frame 13, and on the other leg, which is right here, I'm going to right click, paste, and paste. And you can see they are now both in the same position. So with that leg still selected, so now it's the front leg, I'm going to go back to frame 1, and I'm going to copy the values from here. And then I'm going to just select the left leg again, go back to frame 13, and I'm going to paste those values over. And there you go. So that has now created another contact pose, but everything is now kind of switched. So if we play that, you can see looks a bit wrong at this stage, but we've got the hips rotating, we've got the kind of hips moving backwards and forwards as well. So that's working well, and the legs are going backwards and forwards. So what we're going to do in the next step is we'll set up our first passing pose. You still with me? Good. Right, so now what we'll do is the first passing pose. So if we go back to my little plan that I went for here, we can see that the passing pose is going to happen in between 1 and 13, which puts it at frame 7. So let's go to frame 7, which is right here, and we need to do some work on this. So what we'll do first of all is work out what we're going to do with each foot. So we're going to work on the back foot first, the one that is actually passing. So I'm going to make sure that I select that, and then when I go to frame 7, I still know which is which. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove the foot brake, which sounds like a really good way for your car to roll down a hill, doesn't it? Wordplay. Okay, so remove the foot brake, set that to 0. I'm also going to change the foot roll, so I'm just going to click on that middle mouse button, and what I want to do is I'm just going to turn this around so that it's kind of pointing straight down. Now this will look very much like I'm ripping the leg off, but I'm going to repair that by changing the position as well. So something like that, I think, for now. So that'll do for that foot just for the time being. So it's just raised a little bit off the ground. And then I'm going to select the standing foot. And from this one, I'm going to remove both the foot roll and the foot brake. There we go. And that kind of puts that nicely standing on the ground. So the last thing for me to do now is I'm just going to select the hips and move that up so that he gets a little higher, like that. Right, so that pose I'm actually pretty happy with. So you can see, because we've got auto key turned on, I've got keyframes already on 7 because of the changes I made. Yay! So that's saved a bit of time. So that's set up the first passing pose. In the next step, we'll be setting up the second passing pose where we need to reverse everything. Right, so we've now got 3 solid poses. We're going to add the 4th, which is going to be the reverse passing pose. So this is going to happen between 13 and 25, and my basic understanding of maths tells me that that should be frame 19, right here. Now we don't actually want to do much thinking here. All we're going to do is copy and paste the values from frame 7 onto 19, but onto the opposite foot. So we'll do that first of all. So what I'll do is I'm going to select the left foot, I think I'll start with, and I'm going to copy the values from frame 7. Then I'm going to move to frame 19. I'm going to select the right foot, which is my red controller. I'm going to right click on 19, paste and paste. And you can see that has now taken the pose from frame 7. Okay, so with the right foot still selected, I'm going to go to frame 7. I'm going to copy the values from there. And then what I'll do is change to the left foot. I'm going to go to frame 19, right click and paste those values in there. And hopefully that will work, but it hasn't. And I will show you why. So I'm just going to undo that step and I'm going to go back to frame 7. So you can see I'm actually wanting to copy everything from here, but not everything has got keys set on it. If we look at the other foot, this has got translate values keyed, as well as the foot roll. But this one does not. So the way that we're going to make sure that it copies everything properly is we're just going to set a key just on this foot before we copy it. So I'll press S on my keyboard. You see now everything goes red. Now I'm going to copy that. And when I move to frame 19 and switch feet, if Jeebus loves me, I will be able to paste that over, which it has. So now when I click between 7 and 19, they look identical over here anyway, other than the fact that they've swapped legs. There's one more thing that we need to change though. If you look, when I'm clicking between them, whilst the feet position is kind of staying consistent, the height is changing. Now we can't just copy and paste the keyframe for the hips because we've got other rotation things going on. So what we're going to do is just go to frame 7 and I'm going to look at my translate Y value, which is set to 0.076, and I'm just going to put that on here as well. So minus 0.076, which is what it should be, and that now has keyed for me because I've got auto key turned on, and when I'm flicking between them, that works a blooming treat. Okay, so let's play that and see what we're doing. And you can see now that we've got those passing poses in, it's starting to look a lot more like a walk cycle. So that is the 2 passing poses done. In the next step, we're going to do the first down pose. Okay, we're doing very well so far. So we're going to continue with this magnificent progress we're making by getting this down pose sorted. So let's go back to my reference video that I've cut down, and this one here is the down pose. This is what we're going for. You can see the timer here is frame 4. So let's get this one sorted. So on frame 4, what we're going to do is yeah, definitely some work needed on frame 4. This does not look good. Right, so we're going to move to frame 4, and the first thing I'm going to do is just move the hips down slightly. Okay, the reason it's called the down pose is because things move down a little bit. Okay, then I'm going to select the front foot, which is the right foot. This is the one that's coming backwards. And I'm going to remove from this the foot roll. So I'm going to set that to 0. You can see that plants it firmly on the ground, which is what we want. We want now that foot is connected with the ground properly. Okay, then I'm going to select the back foot. And from this one, we're going to take off the foot brake. And that should kind of straighten the foot out because there's no tiptoe, there's no bending the toe happening now. The next thing we want to do is place that foot back on the ground because it shouldn't be raising yet. This is the down pose is where you kind of build your momentum, so you're pushing off with that back foot. So to do that, we're just going to set the translate Y value of this foot to 0, and you can see that puts it back in contact with the ground. Okay, the last thing I want to do is I want it to kind of look like this back foot is pushing off. So you can see here, kind of the main contact point of the foot is just where this part of the foot is here. and that's just before this line. So on frame 4, I want to just push this back a little bit, so that's kind of the same area, and it'll just hopefully look like that's pushing off, which is what we're going for. So that there is our first down pose complete. So what we'll be doing in the next step, if you've noticed a pattern yet, is we'll be putting in the reverse down pose. What we'll do in this step then is we will now mirror the down pose that we created in the last step onto the opposite feet a little bit further on. So you can see that we did our last down pose on frame 4, which, to kind of work out, that's 3 frames after our contact pose. So the next time that we're 3 frames after a contact pose is at frame 16. So it's 16 where we'll put our next down pose. So the first thing I want to do is just copy the information from one foot to the other, like we did with the previous steps. So I'm going to start with, we'll go left foot first. So I'm going to copy the values here, and then I'm going to go to frame 16, select the right foot, and I'm going to paste that on there. And I'm just going to check to see if I like that. That looks right. I think when I drop the hips, I think that's going to match up properly. So what we're also going to do is, with the right foot selected, we're going to go to frame 4 now. And I'm going to copy that, and then go to frame 16 again, change feet, and then I'm going to paste. Okay, and then I'm just going to flick between 4 and 16, and they're not exactly right. So what we're going to do is just mirror the Y value of the hips and hope that sorts it out. So we'll go to frame 4, and we can see that's set to minus 0.185. So we'll go to 16 and change that to minus 0.185. That has definitely had an effect. We'll see if it's the right effect. Nope, that's definitely not what I wanted it to be. So what we're going to do then is select both feet on frame 4, and we're going to key everything. Press S. And now we're going to copy those values over again, and it should work. So we'll start again with the left foot. So I'm going to copy that, and then I'll switch to the right foot, go to frame 16, and we'll paste that in. That looks better. I'm going to keep that foot selected, go to frame 4, copy the values, switch to the other foot, back to 16, and then paste. Okay, and that now looks a lot better. So if I now flick between these two, again, they look identical, but I've swapped the value onto different feet. So that is now 2 down poses complete. So let's play that, and it's starting to come together. You can see now that it's got a little bit of swagger, I think. He's got swag. And a lot of the key poses are now working together. So now that our 2 down poses are complete, in the next step, we will create the first up pose. Okay, so what we need to do now is get the first up pose created. Right, so as you can see, this walk cycle's coming together, so they're making a change every 3 frames. So if we have a look here, we've got 1, 4, 7, and the next thing that we need to look at is creating a pose on frame 10. And you can see this is our up pose, so that's what we're going to create. So let's move to frame 10. Okay, the kind of distinguishing thing about an up pose is that everything is at the highest point in the walk cycle. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to start by moving the hips up, and we're going to go as high as we can without breaking anything. So then what we'll do is we'll work on the front foot a little bit. So the first thing I'll do is remove the foot brake, because we don't need any of that. So I'm going to set that to 0. And then what I'll do is I'm just going to move it back a little bit, just to create this sort of shape that I want. And I'm going to change the foot roll just so that it's kind of facing that way, and then just a little bit more positioning work needs to happen here. So I'm just going to make sure that's raised up ever so slightly. Yeah, so that's the kind of shape that I want to go for on the front leg. On the back leg though, I'm just going to increase the foot roll and the foot brake a little bit, because what that will do is it'll allow me to raise the hips up a little bit more without overextending anything like that. So I think that is what I'm going to go with for my up pose. So with that pose done, what we're going to do is just select both feet, and we're just going to press S to set keys and everything, just to rule out any of the problems that we've had in previous steps. And then in the next step, we're going to create the second up pose. Okay, so it's time to get the last pose done. So we are so close to finishing. It's so exciting. Right. So we're going to do the second up pose, which kind of just means that we have to reverse everything around on frame 22. So the first thing I want to do for this one is I'm actually just going to copy the values over from the hips first. So on frame 10, I can see that my translate Y is minus 0.033. So I'm going to go to frame 22, and I'm just going to set that to be the same value. And that's a good start. Okay, now what I need to do is reverse what's happening on the legs. So because I keyed them already, it shouldn't give me any problems. So I'm going to start with the left leg, and I'm going to copy the values from frame 10. I'm then going to switch to the right leg, and then on frame 22 I'm going to paste that over. Lovely. Right, now with the right leg selected, I'm going to go to frame 10, copy the values there, select the left leg, go to 22 and paste them in. Boom. Right, let's just flick between 10 and 22 and make sure that they look similar. Okay, so that's looking nice. So what I need to do now is test this. Okay, so this is the basis of our walk cycle, and it's already not bad, but in the next step we're just going to polish this by using the graph editor. There are a couple of areas I can see. If you look closely, you can see that the feet are raising at certain points, so we'll look at repairing that in the next step. Right, now that the walk cycle is basically finished, what we need to do now is have a proper look at it and make sure that we iron out any issues. So if we have a look at our walk cycle as it stands, particularly what's happening with the feet. So as I scroll through, let's watch this front foot, and as it comes back, there it's okay, but it's raising up off the ground, which shouldn't really happen. There it's all kinds of wonky. And then somewhere it's raising off the ground there. That is well up in the air. So there's definitely some issues that we need to address. So I'm going to start with this foot. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to select everything in here. I'm going to press A. I'm going to select all my tangents, all my lines. I'm going to set them all to spline, because it appears that they didn't stay that way. I think that's going to give me a much smoother curve. Yeah, so that foot I'm actually kind of happy with. So there are a few places now where I need to go back in and make repairs, but I think for the whole thing, I'm going to select every single thing. Hang on. So let's select everything in here. Make sure I can see everything. Select all those curves. I'm just going to change them all to spline. Yep, so that's a few changes that have been made there. Right, let's see what that gives us. Yeah, so already that's much better, and I just need to make a few tweaks. So let's go back to this back foot, and I can see that this issue here, where the foot, in fact no, this one, the foot wobbles. There we go. So I need to sort that one out. So I'm going to select these two, and I'm going to set that to linear, and that'll give me a nice straight line. That'll keep that foot planted. Yep. And I'll have the same issue on this foot over here. So let's set that to linear. Okay. Let's play that back and see what that looks like now. from the front. That looks kind of tidy. Let's just turn the curves off. Okay. So through playing with the graph editor, there are definitely some more improvements that could be made to this. But I think for now, I'm happy enough with that. So there we go. Right, so that brings us to the end of this tutorial. I hope you've learned something. Obviously, in this one, we've only done a walk cycle on the legs. If you would like to see a full body walk cycle, then make sure you like this video, hit the subscribe button, and leave a comment telling me that that's what you want to see. If you want the full body tutorial, then say, hey Shane, where's the full body tutorial? And when I find time, that'll be something that I'll add to my list of tutorials to make. If you have any problems with this, or if you need help, then once a month I have video chats with my Patreon supporters. So they bring me problems, they ask me questions, and I help them solve them, send me files, etc. So if you'd like that kind of support, then consider checking out the link below the video, checking out my Patreon campaign, and maybe supporting me there. And that way you'll get access to me much more one-to-one than simply through the YouTube comments, and I'll be able to help you out there. As well as that, you will get the handout, the written version of this exercise, which I'll make available to all my patrons. I want to say thanks to 3D.sk for sponsoring this video. You really should go and check out their reference video section, as well as their reference images as well. There's some really good stuff on there. The 3D capture stuff that they're doing is ridiculously good, and that's something I want to play with in the future. Maybe I'll rig one of those characters up for a tutorial. But you should definitely check out their site because it's really good. And one last thing, if you're watching this video because you're getting into animation, then you really need to make sure you understand the fundamentals. So for God's sake, buy this book. It's such a good book. So it's by Richard Williams. It's called The Animator Survival Kit. I will have a link in the video description. Check it out. It'll be the best book you've ever bought, I promise. Okay, so that's me finished. Thanks for watching this one, and I will see you in the next one.